Hello. Welcome to the Caring Community segment on community agreements. I'm Sally Hanson. I'm here with my colleague and friend Jackie. And this is a video series of information that's being generously funded through Rocky Mountain Human Services in Denver, Colorado. So thank you to our funder. If you're following along with this series, you've watched the introduction to our work, you know who Jackie and I are. You've also learned a little bit about community agreements and supportive, welcoming environments. If not, we encourage you to go back and take a look at those things whenever you have time to do so. But just as a reminder, in this video series, we're making some assumptions about the work you're doing and that you already have children with disabilities learning and growing together in your inclusive environments. And so this information is really meant to help you make those experiences centered on belonging and inclusion for everyone and with everyone. So just keep in mind that the information we're sharing here is meant to get you started and help you start thinking about these things, build on the practices you already have, but it isn't going to be able to take the place of intensive professional development or coaching or consultation. We do have opportunities for you to look at resources or join our Substack to learn more about it if you want to do that. So let's get started. Community agreements are one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to inclusion and belonging. And so I'm really grateful that this gets to be one of our key topics. For me, community agreements are really important because it helps us support children in the ways that work for them without leading to chaos. You might want to be thinking a little bit about what does the idea of community agreement mean for you? Before we pause, I want to share a few things about what we're thinking. So for us, community agreements are the shared promises we make to one another to keep our classroom safe, a caring place, a respectful place to learn and grow. And when I think about this, I'm wondering, some of you might already have some kind of program-wide expectations. You might have classroom rules posted. And that is one of the key evidence-informed practices, is to have behavior expectations. And so what we want to do in terms of creating caring community agreements is to build on the idea of a program-wide expectation or a classroom expectation and move it from something that adults tell children to do to something we create together. So if our program has some kind of expectation, for example, we agree, be safe. That's a value, that's important. In our community agreement, we would ask children, how do we want to keep ourselves and our friends safe in our classroom, in our hallway, on the playground? We might include families in making those decisions. And so it's a really tiny shift to a community agreement, but the impact is really big. It's a really big impact because when we ask children how they want to take care of things, how they want to learn and grow together, they're part of it and they're more invested. So if we said, how do we stay safe in the parking lot? And kids agreed, we walk with a grown-up. If we're walking out, we can remind them. Jackie might be able to say to Goldie, all right, we're headed to the parking lot. Remember, in the parking lot, we stay safe by walking with grown-ups. Because it's her part of the rule that she created, not something adults are telling her to do. It also helps us shift from compliance to a rule that an adult created to connection and community in doing it together. Jackie, you have another example?
Well, it made me think, Sally, of, you mentioned Goldie, what I was thinking in my head. Goldie, my 5-year-old daughter. Goldie does not have disabilities. My older daughter is disabled. And the joke is always, Goldie gives me every opportunity to use the skills that I have around social and emotional competence and behavior. And we ended up with an extra phone, and Goldie really loves connecting with our family. We live in Denver. So many of our family live back in Pennsylvania. So we put 4 people on the phone where she could voice message them or call them. And then I thought, we need to make some agreements about this house phone. And Goldie would tend to just take the opportunity to disagree, challenge, and exercise her autonomy to not agree with any ideas that I have when I'm just the mom or the grown-up saying we have to do this or this is how it has to go. So we took the approach at home that we're talking about here, and we created agreements for the phone, and what it was going to look like and when we could use it and how we could use it. And because she was a part of that, it's never been a struggle. And if there's a child who would give any of us an opportunity for it to be a struggle, it would be my daughter. Just that we're still talking about the same things. What do we want to do? How can we use it safely? What's that going to look like? But because she was a part of it, just that little shift created such a difference in how we can use our things at home.
I think that's just it. It's a really big impact for a really small investment. And it just, again, creates that community of belonging because I was part of it. And that you didn't do it to me, you are doing it with me. And I think about that in a lot of spaces that even as adults, if I said, I'm trying to work on being more active, and someone said, well, you should get 10,000 steps a day, or maybe I want to take up swimming, or maybe I want to take up pickleball. So figuring out where do we have voice and choice and autonomy really matters as adults, and it matters for children too. And so that's what we're talking about with community agreements. And so we'll just let you pause the recording here, go into your activity guide, and make some notes about what are you thinking so far? Why do you think it might be important to create community agreements? And then we'll pick up here in a minute whenever you're ready to unpause and come back together. So you've had some time to think yourself about community agreements. You've heard our introduction. As we think about why is this so important, the things we know is that when we develop community agreements with children and families when possible, children feel part of the group and they share responsibility for one another and for the space. They reflect a little bit more the values that we have around belonging and kindness and respect. And so we can ask some questions and work through some things around how do we want to learn and grow together? How will we take care of each other? And how will we take care of our things? Essentially, it comes down to what's okay and what's not okay. And I think about that as in my role as a coach, when I'm coaching in classrooms or in early childhood mental health consultation. If we hear that a child is struggling, first I'm going to be asking, what's the routine? And we'll talk about that in a different video series, how important routines are and what inclusion and belonging-based routines look like. But then the next thing I want to understand is, does the child actually know what's okay and what's not okay in this particular situation? And do they know what their choices are and how what's okay and what's not okay can work for them? One of the things that comes to mind is if we imagine together that we're in a childcare center space and we're reading a book at story time. We have a large group going on and we have a story time. And right now there's a child who is lying on their tummy and looking at the book and maybe rolling side to side a bit. And in that scenario, maybe there's another child who goes, oh, she bumped me, right? Or I can't see because Goldie is rolling around on the floor. I'm not saying Goldie did, but what if she did? We have an opportunity here to think about our response from a caring community agreement perspective. So I might say, as that childcare teacher, hey, Goldie, we need to sit crisscross applesauce at circle time. Which, by the way, I don't know why we say applesauce at the end of crisscross. Is it just because it rhymes?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Okay, so if we say she has to sit crisscross applesauce, that's behavior expectation. If we think about it from a community agreement perspective, we might pause even in that moment, or ideally we would pre-plan. How can we figure out as a group, all of us together, what are we going to do at circle time so everyone can be comfortable, can be safe, and can listen and learn? What ideas do you all have as the kids in this class, as the children that we're doing the group time with, so that everyone can participate? And then when we do that, we develop some options. And when I think about this, I remember, Jackie, a time where you reminded me or helped me think about it from the perspective of oftentimes children with low muscle tone struggle in those situations, and we might not know about those low muscle tone support needs. And so what I was thinking is, in that scenario, when we ask, how can we all be at story time together? We are building empathy for how one another learn best as well.
Yeah, I was thinking similar things, Sally, and it's just learning that we all have differences and we all learn differently. and also from one day to another. And I think when you're talking about it, it's not that children choose at the beginning of the year, this is how I'm always going to sit at circle time. And another thing that people think about often when we start talking about this is, well, then do they just get to choose on the spot all the time? No, that's not necessarily the case either, because like you said, we have to be planned and we want to be prepared, but it's planning with children and with families, not for children and for families. So crisscross applesauce could be one way that we could show safe seating or respectful or whatever your agreements are at large group. And like you said, what if our muscles are really sore one day? Or what if it's just hard for us to use our brain to focus and to communicate and sit there at the same time? What ideas do we have that could also be ways that we could show or live into this agreement at circle time? And I think it helped kids think about what they need and advocate for their needs. And also, like you said, the empathy, think about what their friends need and advocate for their friends' needs as well. But it also helps kids with disabilities realize that their way is a real way, and that they can and should expect the same type of care and respect to be offered by others as they're expected to show others throughout the day as well. When we take that little tiny shift in community agreements in this way, it teaches kids with disabilities or differences that they should expect the same type of love and care and respect and inclusion as they're expected to, offer adults and other children in the classroom as well.
The last thing I want to say about this is we think about that circle time example, and thank you, Jackie, for sharing, what is that perspective really when we think about children with disabilities or just learning differences or just any given day. Maybe my back hurts today or it's not comfortable. We talked about in the supportive, welcoming environments how we offer those flexible options. And so this is an extension and an alignment to that. I also think it's important for us to consider the perspectives of the children in our classroom when we do things like circle time rules. And we've all heard, or possibly I have, sung the song, eyes are watching, ears are listening, voices quiet. When I start thinking about what does that feel like if I'm a child who's blind visually impaired, and so eyes are watching is going to be hard for me. And now, is my way a real way? If my way of doing circle time doesn't include a lot of focused looking at the book, right? I might need it provided to me in a different way, close to my body so I can see it better. And those examples we can find all over the place because everyone does have different strengths and needs and preferences and priorities. And so those are opportunities for us, again, as we create our community agreements. What are we going to do together? We can start with something broad, like we're going to be safe at all of these times of the day. We're going to be kind. We're going to be careful with our materials, whatever that is. Then we can ask kids, how are we going to do that together? Okay, so when we think about developing and supporting community agreements, we would think these are 4 steps you might take, and you might adjust them based on your teaching preferences and what you know about the children in your class. I'm going to just run through the 4, and then we have examples of each coming up so we can unpack what they might look like. But first, we want to, of course, explain and co-create with children. And so when we think about that, we're thinking about it from that inclusion lens of lots of different ways to explain things, and lots of different ways to gather information, and we'll share some examples. Once we have our agreements created, we want to show what they are and teach them, again, in a variety of ways. And so we might use words or pictures, visuals, symbols. We might do videos. We might act it out. Think about how we can share it with families. Then lots of time to practice and connect to the agreements, using real routines, thinking about the agreements, prepping children ahead of time. All right, we're about to be entering the hallway. Let's remember, how do we take care of one another and everyone else in the hallway, so that we're, again, giving them time to internalize what these agreements look like, and then celebrating and revisiting and giving children that acknowledgement when they've done that, when they've lived into our community values and we see that increasing belonging and connection. We want to make sure that's a ritual in our classroom that we revisit. And so what we start with when we think about co-creating examples with children, This is a lot of those variety of ways and including children in making the agreements. And Jackie, I think you're going to share with us some of these examples.
Absolutely. And so, like you've already started saying, Sally, co-creation isn't about how children communicate. It's about how we make sure that they can communicate all of their ideas and all of the things that are important to them. And so co-creation really isn't dependent on whether or not a child's able to verbally express or able to really fluently use their AAC device yet. We always remind ourselves and the people we get to work with that we need to be really careful to remember that even with the best assessments or tools available, we really can't ever truly know what a child understands. So we have to just presume that they always have ideas to share that we, because we're not in their heads with them, can't begin to imagine. And when we're talking about this process, that's a lens that we're having. And we refer to that as presuming competence, which means that we also believe that every child's capable of learning and communicating. And it's our responsibility and also just, I always like to say, our honor as adults to be that person for kids, to figure out what works best with them, to learn about all of their great ideas and the things that they're thinking about all the time. We know every child has preferences in addition to ideas and perspectives that are worth including, and our job is to design ways to help them share those ideas. When we're thinking about kids who maybe have intellectual disabilities or who maybe are non-speaking, we want to be thinking about multimodal communication. Some of those things that we were already talking about: pictures, switches, buttons, AAC devices, visuals, objects, gestures, eye gaze, all of the different ways that we can communicate, and that we do communicate even as speaking adults. I'm talking with my hands. Sally will hold up pictures to the screen and make me look at it, or no, just invite me to look at it.
I do, though. I draw things and then I'm like, it's like this, Jackie.
Yeah, to try to be like, this is what is in my brain. Or we were just presenting last week at a national conference, and I said something to Sally verbally on the side, and she said, I don't understand what that means, but I bet if you wrote it down, I would understand. And I took a minute to write it out, and she was like, yes, that's so important. Please share that with everyone. I just needed the opportunity to express it first and practice it in a way that worked for me, which is always going to be writing. Those are important points. We were hoping that would help you think. So that for kids, that might mean offering pictures or symbols or objects or simple tools like recordable buttons. An example might be that when creating classroom agreements, we could show visual options for help each other or try our best or be kind. And we could invite kids to point to which one feels the most important to you, or press which one feels the most important to you, or hold it up and watch their eye gaze. What do you think is the most important for us to think about right now for this routine? In the example on the left, I could see a teaching team using like inexpensive recordable buttons from Amazon. You can actually buy packs of them for pretty cheap now. And I could see them, helping other children in the class record their agreements in their own voices. And so a non-speaking child could press a button to communicate and have their friend's voice say the agreement out loud. So everyone's contribution is included in a way that works for them. Or again, they could use their AAC device. But when we presume competence, when we offer those choices, the other really important piece of co-creating with kids is that we trust that their choice is meaningful and purposeful. And we don't question, did they really mean to do that? We presume that they really meant to do that and they did it in the best way that they could. And if we wanted to extend this into daily routines or activities, we could print pictures from the classroom and offer them to children, showing them how they're already doing these things. A class could be talking about how to follow their agreements during outside play. And the teacher might say, well, let's look at these pictures of how we were showing how to be safe outside last week. But it's just all of those different ways that we can remind them how in ways that are meaningful for them.
Yeah, I just love hearing you share some of those examples, because one of the things that sometimes comes up when we talk about this with teams is, okay, well, we can ask children what the expectations should be, but what about children with intellectual disabilities? Or what about children who are non-speaking? And it's really important that we do anchor in that presuming competence lens and also offering a variety of ways to show what you know. And so that we really lean into and live into the inclusion and belonging goals that we all have. So if we were going to go again in a stepwise process, step one, co-create some agreements with kids in whatever ways work for the community of children that you have. Step two, show and teach through examples in, again, a variety of ways. And so you all are really competent teachers. Obviously, you know that every child doesn't learn best the exact same way, right? So if we only teach agreements during large group time, some children are going to miss the opportunity to understand those. If we only teach them verbally, some children will miss it. And so we want to offer lots of different ways to show them, to teach them, to provide learning opportunities. Maybe we're going to use puppets, or maybe we're going to have visuals. We might do some video models or pictures of our actual children. Always important to share these things with families, and families can help. And then, Jackie, what were some other things that you might suggest?
Yeah, some of the notes that I have here, because we also warned you that I'm always going to have notes to try to stay on topic, is that we want to help kids know what they are, but to also understand what they mean, why they're important, what happens when we use them in lots of different ways. So we're helping them, of course, first to be able to recognize them and know what they mean, and then to think about, how do I get to feel when I'm using them, and how do my friends feel? And that's where that bigger point of this comes into. We've created them together because it makes us feel good and we get to show care, and it's just bigger. So like Sally was saying, visuals and puppets, even small group practice, offering kids the amount of support that they need to really understand it. You might use stories or role play. Literacy is a great way to think about, maybe for a week, for a couple weeks during circle time, you read a story that really shows and models and offers discussion around a particular agreement, what it means to be kind or safe, or things like that. Again, you could take pictures of kids demonstrating them themselves. For kids who use AAC or other communication supports, we're going to want to make sure that we have symbols or pictures or phrases or vocabulary programmed on their AAC device so they can use words and phrases that are in line with the agreements. So that'll be really important. Words like help, stop, listen, safe, so they can actively participate in practice. You mentioned before, Sally, families. I think this is a really great place where families can get involved and be partners. We could ask families, what does kindness look like in your home? What does listening mean in your culture, or in what might it look like in, your home language? Because we know there's the spoken part of language, and then there's that cultural and social side of language too. We might ask families to share photos or short videos for the class, practicing an agreement at home, what it looks like at home, or email texts or pictures to share stories. You could retell a story. Goldie's mom let me know that she was super kind to her sister on the playground. But really, the big point is here, we're showing and teaching by making these visual and experiential. And we're embedding them into, we might be teaching them in a large group setting at first, or a small group setting, but then we're learning them and practicing them and experiencing them in our routines, and we're acknowledging when kids are using them, and we're modeling them ourselves for adults all the time. We're just living into it in authentic ways across routines to make it meaningful and meet kids where they are, where they want to learn it.
I think that as we move from this notion of creating these agreements together and then teaching them in ways that are flexible and meaningful to the children in our class, include our families, and then moving into this idea of practicing and celebrating, one of the things that really stands out to me, Jackie, about what you said in terms of why we want to teach and support them in this way is to help children connect to the purpose of the agreement, because that's an internalized decision-making process for children rather than an externalized, I'm following the rules so I don't get in trouble. And that's going to be important for us all the way through as we consider what does it really mean to have a caring community that's inclusive and belonging based, where we're very clear that what we are aiming to do here is help children learn, grow, and thrive and become the best versions of themselves, not to get children to listen to the adults only. And so you'll hear us talk a lot about how important connection is over just complying and following directions. And so to me, as we were talking about this, what became really clear and why I love talking about community, caring communities and community agreements is that we're actually helping children build an internal decision-making process that's built on inclusion, belonging, connection, not built on don't get in trouble from the adult.
That's such an important point. And these examples show how we can make community agreements alive every day. So they're not just posted on the wall, they're not just practiced to not get in trouble. They become part of how we care for one another and ourselves, in our space, in our community, and we celebrate them in authentic ways. So in the first example, I love how this one shows children's drawings as part of the display. So each figure shows a child's contribution. My daughter, my older daughter with disabilities, the best way that she can contribute wouldn't be to draw a picture. So oftentimes she's doing collages, or they're asking us to send pictures of home, and they're partnering with us a lot of that. But it represents how kids contribute to this too. And it communicates that we really all belong here. And we're all doing this together, trying our best. The middle example is photos that can make it concrete. They're not stock images. They're actual photos of kids in this classroom. And we can tell a story, or we could have children tell or communicate stories about what was happening in the picture when it was taken. And just really more and more of those ways to really continue to live the agreements together. Were you going to say something, Sal?
Yeah, that one's my super favorite, because what we do know for sure is that we all, as humans, tend to live up to people's expectations and images of us, or unfortunately live down to them unless we're super intentional. I love about the Be Kind examples in the photos is we're showing children, we see you already doing this. And so we already know you can and do. And so you can continue to do it because you already can. It's not something that's so far above your level that you couldn't ever achieve it. You're already doing it. So keep doing it.
I love that. And I do think that actually that's such a good reminder that Be Kind is the agreement. And then all of those other things are what it looks like. And we already do those things. So now we're committing and agreeing to doing that more because we've all said that's important to us. I had some other thoughts. So on the right, I'm really awkward when it comes to puppets, and I will admit that. However, I could see this being really important in terms of, especially if one of our agreements is Be Kind, and we're noticing that kids are being unkind relatively consistently in certain types of situations. I might get out the puppets because puppets create a little bit of that emotional distance where we could work through how kids could, live into that particular community agreement with one another in situations that are maybe a little bit more emotionally charged or tricky for them to do.
It's such a good point. It's just so important to make that point. And I also am awkward with puppets, believe it or not. And there's some really cool reading and research on puppets and how it provides that emotional distance. The thing that I learned in reading through that is you don't have to change your voice. So you can just use yes, it's interesting. You can use your regular voice and use, Mr. Tiger took away Mrs. Lammy's toy and Mrs. Lammy is sad. And then you can just hold up Mrs. Lammy and say, I don't like it when you take my toys. You don't have to make a big theater about it.
I actually love that. I think that there you go.
It's like freedom to just...
We're learning something new every day because that is one of the parts. And then the last note I had, just, to really close the loop on my idea where kids were going to say the agreements for one another, celebrating. So we're celebrating when we're noticing when children are following our community agreements. We're celebrating the effort and how we're noticing that they're really trying and they're learning them. They're trying more to use them with one another. We're asking them, how does that make you feel? Reminding them that they might feel proud or happy as they're doing it. Like Sally, you were talking about internalizing the importance of it. And to bring kids who maybe are non-speaking into it, we might program them into their device as we help children notice when one another are using the community agreements. Or maybe we make it a celebration ritual where they go up when a friend has been kind or has been safe, and they click the button and you hear someone say the agreement out loud. And it's another fun way because kids also love pressing buttons, both our buttons as adults. Get it. But just really thinking creatively about how to include kids more in the things that we tend to do as adults in ways that are important to them and meaningful for them as young children.
So those are some of the things that could get you started, building on what you're already doing to help children understand expectations and what's okay and what's not okay, and shifting into this lens of community agreement. As you progress with us in this video series, you'll hear us talk more and more about concepts like all play is okay, my way is a real way. And what I'll say in preview to that is community agreements is the anchor that allows us to trust more choice and more flexibility later. And so as you work through your activity guide and you think about the different steps that we talked about, how are we going to co-create agreements? Where should we start? Which agreement do we want to unpack first? And what does it look like in different times of our day? Just know that this really is a foundational inclusion and belonging practice that does offer us some flexibility and comfort in the future so that we don't end up with chaos. We have clear options and flexible choice anchored in our community agreements. And that takes us to the end of this segment. If you're following along with us, the next thing we're talking about is recognizing and celebrating everyone's strengths. And so creating that extended caring community by valuing everyone's uniqueness and their strengths and differences. And if you're on your own adventure with this series, we'll see you in whichever part you pick next.